The billionaire asked for her body, but her innocence made him ask for her heart instead. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She never expected that serving coffee would change her entire life, but sometimes destiny comes disguised as a simple Tuesday morning. The steam from the espresso machine hissed like a tired sigh as Leona Brooks wiped down the counter for the third time in 10 minutes. The corporate cafe buzzed with its usual morning chaos, lawyers clutching briefcases, executives barking into phones, assistants juggling multiple coffee orders like circus performers. Everyone moved with the frantic energy of people who believed their next meeting would change the world. Leona had learned to read them all. The woman in the navy suit who always ordered a double shot when her divorce papers were due. The young intern who trembled slightly when ordering for his demanding boss. The security guard who counted coins twice before buying his black coffee, no sugar. She understood struggle. She lived it. "Next!" Leona called out, her voice carrying the kind of warmth that made strangers feel like old friends. A businessman stepped forward, phone pressed to his ear, not bothering to look up. "Large coffee, black extra hot," he muttered, sliding a 20 across the counter without breaking his conversation about quarterly profits and market projections. Leona prepared his order with practiced efficiency, her movements graceful despite the cramped space behind the counter. She had been working at Pinnacle Towers Cafe for 2 years now, saving every tip, every overtime hour. The math was always the same: rent, groceries, mom's medication, a few dollars left over if she was lucky. The morning rush continued its relentless pace. Mrs. Henderson from the law firm ordered her usual vanilla latte with extra foam. Tony from maintenance grabbed his energy drink and a muffin, always leaving his change in the tip jar with a wink. These small interactions were the highlights of Leona's day, moments of genuine human connection in a building full of people too busy to truly see each other. At 9:47 a.m., something shifted. The elevator doors opened with their familiar ding, and conversations seemed to quiet just a fraction. Leona glanced up from the register and felt the atmosphere change, like the moment before thunder rolls across the sky. Julian Mercer stepped into the cafe. She had never seen him before, but somehow she knew. The way he moved, purposeful, unhurried, like someone who had never waited for anything in his life. His charcoal grey suit fit perfectly, probably costing more than Leona made in 3 months. Dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes that seemed to catalogue everything around him with the precision of a man who made billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. Other customers instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path to the counter. Phone conversations became whispers. Even the espresso machine seemed to hiss more quietly. Julian approached her station with measured steps, his attention focused on his phone screen. Leona straightened slightly, smoothing her apron, a nervous habit she had developed working with demanding customers. "Good morning," she said, her standard greeting carrying the same genuine warmth she offered everyone. "What can I get started for you today?" He looked up then, and for a moment something flickered across his features. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. People in this building rarely made eye contact with service staff, but Leona always did. It was who she was. "Coffee?" he said simply, his voice deep and controlled. "Large. Any particular type? We have our house blend, Colombian, or a dark roast that's really popular. Whatever's fastest." Leona nodded, reaching for a large cup. "Name for the order?" "Mercer." She wrote it carefully on the cup, her handwriting neat despite the morning rush. As she prepared his coffee, she could feel him watching her, not in the way some men did, with wandering eyes and inappropriate comments, but with genuine attention, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Here you go, Mr. Mercer," she said, sliding the cup across the counter. "Have a great day." He picked up the coffee, paused, then looked at the cup. A slight frown crossed his face. "You spelled it wrong." Leona looked at the cup and felt her cheeks warm. Instead of Mercer, she had written Mercer. A simple mistake, the kind that happened during busy mornings. "I'm so sorry," she began, reaching for the cup. "Let me make you a new one." "No." His response was quick, almost sharp, then softer. "It's fine." But he didn't move away from the counter. Instead, he stood there, studying her face with an intensity that made her fidget with her apron strings. "Leona," he said, reading her name tag. "Unusual name." "It means brave as a lion," she replied automatically, then immediately felt foolish. Why was she sharing personal details with a stranger? Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the professional mask. Are you? Am I what? Brave as a lion. The question hung between them, loaded with meaning Leona couldn't quite grasp. Around them, the cafe continued its morning symphony, but this conversation felt separate from it all, existing in its own pocket of time. I don't know, she answered honestly. I guess we all have to be brave in different ways. Julian studied her for another long moment, as if memorizing her features. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the elevators, coffee cup in hand. Leona watched him go, feeling strangely unsettled. Something about that interaction had been different. Not the usual transactional exchange she was used to, but something deeper, more personal. So who was that? Whispered Celia, her co-worker, appearing beside her with wide eyes. Julian Mercer, I think. You think? Celia grabbed Leona's arm. Girl, that's the Julian Mercer. Mercer Holdings? The real estate guy? He owns half the buildings in Atlanta. Leona's stomach dropped. She had misspelled a billionaire's name, of all the customers to make a mistake with. But as she replayed the conversation, she realized something strange. He hadn't seemed angry about the spelling error. If anything, he had seemed intrigued. The rest of the morning passed in its usual blur, but Leona found herself glancing toward the elevators more often than usual. Part of her expected him to return, to complain to her manager about the service, but he didn't. At 2:30 p.m., as she was wiping down tables during the afternoon lull, Celia approached with a knowing smile. Look what just came for you, she said, holding out an envelope. Inside was a $50 bill and a note written in precise handwriting, for the coffee with the creative spelling. Keep being brave, J.M. Leona stared at the note, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. $50 was more than she usually made in tips all week, but it wasn't the money that made her hands tremble slightly. It was the way he had remembered her words about being brave. As she folded the note carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket, Leona had no idea that upstairs, 37 floors above, Julian Mercer was standing at his office window, looking down at the street below, thinking about a woman who had smiled at him like he was just another person. And for the first time in years, he found himself wondering what it would be like to be seen not as a billionaire, not as a business deal, but simply as a man named Julian who had his name spelled wrong on a coffee cup. Tomorrow, he decided, he would come back, not for the coffee, for the woman who had looked him in the eyes and asked him nothing at all. What happens when a billionaire meets someone who doesn't want his money? Will Julian return tomorrow, or was this just a moment of curiosity that will fade by morning? He told himself it was just convenience, but deep down, Julian knew he was lying to himself. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp November air that made Atlanta feel almost magical. Leona stood at the bathroom mirror in her small apartment, braiding her hair with practiced efficiency. The $50 tip from yesterday sat on her kitchen counter, still seeming surreal. She had stared at it for 20 minutes the night before, wondering what kind of person left such generous tips for misspelled coffee orders. Her morning routine was sacred. Shower, coffee with powdered creamer, check on Mom via text, catch the 7:15 bus to Pinnacle Tower. Today felt different, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Maybe it was the extra spring in her step, knowing she could actually buy groceries this week without counting every penny. The cafe was already bustling when she arrived. Marcus, the morning shift supervisor, was frantically trying to fix the temperamental espresso machine, while a line of impatient customers grew longer by the minute. "Thank God you're here," he called out, sweat beading on his forehead. "This thing's been acting up since 6 a.m. Leona tied her apron and dove into the familiar chaos. She had a gift for this work, reading customers' moods, remembering their preferences, making small talk that actually meant something. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Mrs. Patterson from the insurance company ordered her usual chai latte, extra hot, no foam. "How's your mother doing, sweetheart?" she asked, genuinely concerned. Leona had mentioned her mom's arthritis medication costs a few weeks ago. "She's hanging in there," Leona replied, expertly steaming milk. "Some days are better than others." "Well, you tell her I'm praying for her." These moments reminded Leona why she loved this job, despite the long hours and modest pay. In a world that often felt disconnected, she created tiny bridges between people's lives. At exactly 9:47 a.m., the same time as yesterday, the elevator doors opened. Julian Mercer stepped out, and Leona felt that strange flutter in her stomach again. Today he wore a navy suit that somehow made his dark eyes look even more intense. He approached her station with the same measured confidence, but something was different. He was looking at her, really looking. "Good morning," Leona said, her professional smile in place. "Back for another creatively spelled coffee." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Actually, I was hoping you'd get it right this time." "I'll do my best," she replied, reaching for a cup. "Same order as yesterday? Large coffee, black?" He paused. "And maybe your name spelled correctly on the cup." Leona laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise them both. "I think I can manage that." She wrote Leona on the cup with deliberate care, then showed it to him. "Approval? Perfect penmanship," he said, and this time he definitely smiled. As she prepared his coffee, she could feel him watching her again. Not uncomfortable scrutiny, but something warmer, curious. "You've worked here long?" he asked. 2 years next month." She concentrated on the coffee, trying to ignore how his voice seemed to resonate in her chest. "You? Excuse me? How long have you worked in the building? I haven't seen you before yesterday." Julian looked genuinely taken aback, as if no one had ever asked him such a simple question. "I own the building." The coffee pot slipped slightly in Leona's hands. She steadied it quickly, hoping he hadn't noticed. "Oh, that's nice." Nice? Did she just call owning a 40-story office tower nice? But Julian's expression suggested he found her reaction refreshing rather than embarrassing. "Most people have a stronger reaction to that information," he said quietly. Leona finished his coffee and slid it across the counter. "Most people probably care more about things like that than I do. And what do you care about?" The question was so direct, so personal, that Leona felt exposed. She glanced around the busy cafe, acutely aware that other customers were waiting, but Julian showed no signs of moving along. "Real things," she said finally, "making sure my mum can afford her medication, helping Mrs. Chen from 4B carry her groceries upstairs, saving enough money to go back to school someday." "What would you study?" "Nursing." The word came out soft, almost reverent. "I want to help people who are hurting." Something shifted in Julian's expression, a depth of emotion that seemed to surprise even him. He stared at her for a long moment, as if seeing something he hadn't expected to find. "That's," he began, then stopped. "That's admirable. It's just what feels right." The line behind Julian was growing restless. A man in an expensive watch cleared his throat pointedly. Julian glanced back, then returned his attention to Leona. "I should let you get back to work," he said, but made no move to leave. "Probably," she agreed, but didn't turn away either. "Maybe I'll see you tomorrow." "I'll be here," Leona replied. "Someone has to keep the coffee flowing and the names spelled correctly." This time his smile was full and genuine, transforming his entire face. "I'm counting on it." As he walked away, Leona noticed he didn't head straight to the elevators like yesterday. Instead, he stopped at a small table near the window, opened his laptop and began working. From there he had a clear view of the counter, and of her. Throughout the morning, Leona found herself glancing his way. He seemed to be conducting important phone calls, occasionally typing with the focused intensity of someone making million-dollar decisions. But every so often, their eyes would meet across the cafe, and he would nod slightly, as if sharing a private joke. During her lunch break, Leona sat in the small employee room, eating a peanut butter sandwich and thinking about their conversation. There had been something almost vulnerable in the way he asked what she cared about, as if her answer mattered more than it should to a stranger. When she returned to the counter, Julian was gone, but on the table where he had been sitting, she found another note tucked under a coffee cup. "Thank you for seeing me as just Julian. Most people forget that's who I am underneath everything else. JMPS. Your dream of nursing school isn't just admirable, it's essential. The world needs more people like you." Leona folded the note carefully, her hands trembling slightly. She looked toward the elevators, wondering which floor he worked on, what his office looked like, whether he was thinking about their conversation too. Celia appeared beside her, following her gaze. "Girl, you better be careful." "What do you mean? Men like that don't come to cafes to make friends. They come because they want something." Leona's stomach tightened. "You think he's just playing games? I think he's a billionaire who's never been told no in his life. And you—" Celia gestured toward Leona's modest uniform, her name tag, the tips jar that never seemed to fill up fast enough. "You're exactly the kind of challenge men like that find irresistible." The words stung because they echoed Leona's own fears. She had grown up watching her mother trust the wrong men, make excuses for charming words that never led to lasting commitments. She had promised herself she would be smarter, stronger, But as she reread Julian's note, something in her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was different. That night, as Leona rode the bus home through Atlanta's evening traffic, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Julian had looked when she mentioned nursing school, as if her dreams mattered to him, even though they had just met. She stared out the window at the city lights, wondering if he was somewhere up there in one of those gleaming office buildings, thinking about a cafe worker who served coffee with creative spelling and believed in helping people who were hurting. What she didn't know was that 37 floors above the cafe, Julian was indeed thinking about her. And for the first time in his adult life, he was questioning everything he thought he knew about what he wanted. Some conversations change everything, even when they're about nothing at all. Rain drummed against the cafe windows like impatient fingers, creating rivulets that distorted the view of downtown Atlanta. The morning rush was lighter than usual, people choosing to work from home rather than brave the November storm. Leona found herself grateful for the slower pace, though she couldn't shake the nervous energy that had been building since she woke up. For 3 days now, Julian had appeared at exactly 9:47 a.m. For 3 days, their conversations had grown longer, deeper, more personal. And for 3 days, Leona had gone home wondering if she was reading too much into simple kindness. Today felt different. The air between them had been charged with something unspoken, something that made her pulse quicken whenever their fingers accidentally brushed during the coffee exchange. At 9:45 a.m., Leona found herself checking her reflection in the espresso machine's surface, smoothing her hair, adjusting her apron. When had she started caring how she looked for a customer? "You're fidgeting," observed Rhonda, the older woman who worked the pastry station. She had been at the cafe longer than anyone, possessed the wisdom of someone who had seen every type of human drama play out over coffee orders. "I'm not fidgeting. Honey, I've watched you serve 1,000 cups of coffee. You don't usually check your lipstick in the milk steamer." Leona felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's not—" The elevator dinged. Julian stepped out, shaking raindrops from his dark hair, and Leona's protest died in her throat. Today he wore a charcoal sweater instead of his usual suit, making him look less like a corporate titan and more like just a man. A devastatingly handsome man who was walking directly toward her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Rough morning?" she asked, noting the slight tension around his eyes. "Board meeting that started at 7. 3 hours of grown men arguing about profit margins while the city drowns outside." He ran a hand through his damp hair. "Sometimes I wonder what the point of all this is." The admission surprised them both. Julian looked almost startled that he had shared something so personal, so human. "The usual?" Leona asked gently, giving him space to retreat if he wanted. "Actually," Julian hesitated, glancing around the nearly empty cafe, "do you have a few minutes? I mean, when you're not busy?" Leona's heart did something acrobatic. "I can take a quick break." "Marcus," she called to her supervisor, who was absorbed in inventory sheets. "I'm taking 5. Make it 10, Marcus replied without looking up. "Dead in here anyway." Julian gestured toward a small table in the corner, away from the few scattered customers. Leona prepared 2 cups of coffee, his black, hers with a splash of cream, and joined him. The intimacy of sitting across from each other, of choosing to share space and time, felt significant in ways that made her hands tremble slightly. "You don't have to sit with me," Julian said quietly. "I realize this might be inappropriate." "Inappropriate how?" "I'm technically your customer. You're working. There are power dynamics." Leona studied his face, seeing genuine concern there. "Are you planning to get me fired if I don't sit with you?" "God, no, of course not. Are you going to demand special treatment or make my job harder if I decide to leave?" "Never. Then we're just 2 people having coffee on a rainy morning." She took a sip, meeting his eyes over the rim. Nothing inappropriate about that. Something in Julian's expression softened, as if she had just given him a gift he hadn't known he needed. "Tell me about nursing school," he said. "What's holding you back?" The question was so direct it took her breath away. Most people who learned about her dreams offered empty encouragement or quickly changed the subject. Julian leaned forward, genuinely waiting for her answer. "Money, mostly," she said honestly. "I've got about half of what I need saved, but every time I get close, something happens. Mom's medication costs go up, or the rent increases, or—" She shrugged, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "Life happens. How much do you need?" "Julian, I'm not offering anything," he said quickly. "I'm just curious about the numbers." Leona hesitated, then decided on honesty. About 15,000 for the program I want. It's accelerated, which means I could be working as an RN in 18 months instead of 4 years. Julian nodded thoughtfully. That's not an impossible amount. It is when you make $9.50 an hour and live paycheck to paycheck. The words hung between them, a stark reminder of the vast distance between their worlds. Julian's watch probably cost more than Leona made in a year. His car payment likely exceeded her monthly rent. But instead of seeming uncomfortable with the disparity, he looked angry. You make $9.50 an hour. His voice was tight with something she couldn't identify. It's not your fault, Leona said quickly, misreading his expression. I mean, you own the building, but you don't set cafe wages, and it's honest work. I'm not complaining. You should be. Julian's words cut through her rambling. You should be furious. You work harder than most people I know. You treat everyone with kindness and respect. You have goals and dreams and... He stopped, seeming to catch himself. I'm sorry. This isn't my business. What were you going to say? Nothing. I'm overstepping. Julian. Leona leaned forward, close enough to catch the faint scent of his cologne, to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. What were you going to say? He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You're worth so much more than $9.50 an hour, than 15,000 barriers between you and your dreams, than... He gestured vaguely at the cafe, at her uniform, at the vast inequality of their circumstances. All of this, the intensity in his voice made something flutter in Leona's chest. Not just attraction, though that was certainly there, but something deeper. Recognition, maybe. As if he truly saw her, not just the role she played or the circumstances she found herself in. I don't need rescuing, she said softly. I know. That's what makes this so... He trailed off, shaking his head. Makes what so what? Julian looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable and uncertain in his expression. Complicated. Before Leona could ask what he meant, her break time was over. Marcus called her name, gesturing toward a small line that had formed at the counter. The real world was intruding on their bubble of honesty and connection. I should go, she said, but made no move to stand. Wait. Julian reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. The contact was brief, electric, leaving her skin tingling. Have dinner with me. The words hung in the air between them, changing everything. Julian, not because I own this building or because I have money or because I want something from you, because I want to know what you dream about besides nursing school, because you make me laugh, because you treat me like I'm just a person, and I can't remember the last time someone did that. Leona stared at their hands, his perfectly manicured, hers showing the small burns and calluses of cafe work. Two different worlds touching for just a moment. I don't date customers, she said finally. Then I'll stop being a customer. You'll stop coming here? If that's what it takes. The thought of not seeing him every morning, of losing these moments of connection, made something twist painfully in her chest. But Celia's warnings echoed in her mind, along with her mother's voice reminding her to be smart, to protect herself. I need to think about it, she said. Julian nodded, releasing her hand. Of course, take all the time you need. As Leona stood to return to work, she felt his eyes following her. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of coffee orders and distracted thoughts. When she looked toward Julian's usual table an hour later, he was gone. But on the table, weighted down by his empty coffee cup, was another note. I meant what I said about stopping being a customer if that's what you need, but I hope you'll give me the chance to be something else instead. Something real. Julian P.S. You're right that you don't need rescuing. You're strong enough to save yourself. I just want to be there to cheer you on. Leona clutched the note, her heart racing. For the first time since this strange courtship began, Julian's intentions felt crystal clear. He wasn't playing games or seeking conquest. He was asking for a chance. The question was she brave enough to give him one? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say yes, even when your heart is terrified of the answer. Leona stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror of her apartment, second-guessing herself for the 100th time in 24 hours. The simple black dress she had borrowed from her neighbor looked elegant enough, but it couldn't hide the anxiety written across her face. She had called Julian that morning. The conversation replayed in her mind as she applied a touch of lipstick with shaking hands. His surprise when she said yes. The way his voice had softened when she explained her conditions. Somewhere quiet, somewhere they could actually talk, and absolutely no place that required a dress code she couldn't afford to meet. I know a place, he had said simply. Trust me? Trust. Such a loaded word when it came from a man whose world was so different from hers, it might as well be another planet. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Outside whenever you're ready. No rush." Leona peeked through her apartment window and felt her breath catch. Julian stood beside a modest silver sedan, not the flashy sports car or luxury vehicle she had expected. He wore dark jeans and a simple grey sweater, looking more like a college professor than a billionaire real estate mogul. He was nervous too. She could tell by the way he kept checking his phone, running his hand through his hair, shifting his weight from foot to foot. The realization that this confident, powerful man was anxious about their date made something warm unfurl in her chest. Taking a deep breath, Leona grabbed her purse and headed downstairs. "Hi," she said when she reached the sidewalk, suddenly feeling shy. "Hi yourself." Julian's smile was soft, genuine. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." She gestured toward the car. "This is unexpected." "What were you expecting? A limo? A driver?" "Maybe," Julian laughed, opening the passenger door for her. "I thought about it. Then I realized I actually wanted to drive you myself. Weird, right? When's the last time I drove anywhere that wasn't a necessity?" As they pulled away from her modest apartment complex, Leona found herself studying Julian's profile. There was something different about him tonight, looser, more relaxed, as if stepping away from his usual world had freed him to be more himself. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You said somewhere quiet where we could talk." He glanced over at her, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Do you trust me?" There was that word again. But looking at him now, seeing the genuine care in his expression, Leona found herself nodding. "I trust you." 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of a small diner on the outskirts of the city. The neon sign read, "Millie's All-Night Cafe," in cheerful blue letters. And through the windows, Leona could see red vinyl booths and black and white checkered floors. "This is your idea of dinner?" she asked, unable to hide her amusement. "Best pie in Atlanta," Julian said seriously, "and they make a mean cup of coffee, plus—" He hesitated, looking almost vulnerable. "It's the first place I ever worked." Leona turned to stare at him. "You worked here?" "Summer before my senior year of high school. Washing dishes, bussing tables. My father thought I needed to understand real work before I inherited anything." Julian's smile was rueful. He was right, though probably not in the way he intended. They walked into the diner and immediately, an older woman with silver hair and a warm smile rushed over. "Julian Mercer, as I live and breathe." She enveloped him in a fierce hug. "It's been too long, sweetie." "Hi, Millie, this is Leona." Julian's hand found the small of Leona's back, a gesture so natural it sent warmth radiating through her. "Leona, meet Millie. She taught me everything I know about customer service. And how to make a proper omelette," Millie added with a wink, "though I doubt you remember that skill anymore." She turned to Leona with bright, assessing eyes. "You're prettier than the usual types he brings around." "Millie," Julian's voice held a warning. "What?" "I'm just saying she's got kind eyes. The others all looked like they were calculating your net worth while you were talking." Millie gestured toward a corner booth. "Sit yourselves down. I'll bring you the good coffee." As they settled into the worn vinyl seats, Leona couldn't help but smile. "How many women have you brought here?" "You're the first," Julian said quietly. "The first to this diner, or the first anywhere?" "The first I wanted to bring anywhere that mattered to me." The honesty in his voice made Leona's chest tighten. She looked around the modest diner, at the faded photographs on the walls, the regulars at the counter, the easy familiarity between Millie and her customers, and understood why this place was important to him. "Tell me about working here," she said. Julian's face lit up as he shared stories of his summer at Millie's, burning his first batch of pancakes, learning to balance 6 plates on one arm, dealing with difficult customers who taught him patience. As he talked, Leona saw glimpses of the person he might have been without the weight of family expectations and corporate responsibility. "I was terrible at first," he admitted, laughing at the memory. "Millie threatened to fire me at least once a week, but I kept coming back and eventually I got the hang of it." "Why?" "Because it was the first time in my life that I had to earn something. My paycheck wasn't based on my last name or my trust fund. It was about showing up, working hard, treating people with respect." He met her eyes across the table. "It was real in a way nothing else in my life had been." Millie appeared with 2 cups of coffee and a knowing smile. "You telling her about the time you tried to impress that girl by flipping pancakes and ended up wearing half of them. That's not—" Julian started to protest, but Leona was already laughing. "I need to hear this story." "No, you really don't," Julian said, but he was smiling too. As the evening progressed, their conversation flowed with surprising ease. They talked about everything and nothing, childhood dreams, favorite books, the small moments that had shaped them. Julian listened with genuine attention when Leona described her mother's struggle with arthritis, her own fears about not being smart enough for nursing school, the way she had learned to find joy in simple things. "You're wrong, you know," Julian said when she expressed doubt about her intelligence. "About what?" "About not being smart enough. I've watched you work. You read people instantly, anticipate their needs, manage chaos with grace. Those are skills you can't teach. And the way you care about everyone around you?" He shook his head. "That's wisdom, Leona. That's the kind of intelligence that actually matters." She felt tears prick her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. When was the last time someone had seen her dreams as achievable rather than naive? "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly. "Doing what?" "This. Tonight. Bringing me to a place that matters to you. Listening to me talk about my problems. Making me feel like—" She struggled for the words. "Like I matter." Julian reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Because you do matter. More than you know. But I'm nobody. I serve coffee for minimum wage. I live in a studio apartment and buy generic brand everything. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone." His voice was firm, certain. "I want you. The woman who spells names wrong on coffee cups and still manages to make people smile. The woman who saves every penny for a dream that will help other people. The woman who looks at me and sees Julian, not a bank account." Leona stared at their joined hands, her heart racing. "This is crazy. Maybe. But it's also the most real thing I've felt in years." When they finally left the diner, it was nearly midnight. Julian drove slowly back to her apartment, neither of them wanting the evening to end. As he walked her to her door, the air between them hummed with possibility and uncertainty. "Thank you," Leona said softly, "for tonight, for seeing me. Thank you for letting me." They stood there for a moment, the space between them charged with everything they weren't saying. Julian lifted his hand as if to touch her face, then seemed to catch himself. "I should go," he said quietly. "You should," she agreed, but neither of them moved. "Leona? Yeah? When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to do this again." She looked up into his eyes, seeing patience there and kindness, and something deeper that made her breath catch. "I'd like that too," she whispered. As Julian drove away, Leona stood on her doorstep, watching his taillights disappear into the night. For the first time in years, she felt brave enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, some dreams were worth the risk, even the ones that scared her most. Sometimes falling in love means learning to catch yourself before you hit the ground too hard. The morning after their date, Leona found herself arriving at work 30 minutes early, her stomach a tangle of butterflies and anticipation. She had barely slept, replaying every moment of the evening, Julian's stories about working at Millie's, the way he had looked at her when she talked about nursing school, the almost touch at her doorstep that had left her skin humming with possibility. But as 9:47 a.m. approached, doubt crept in like morning fog. What if last night had been just a momentary escape for him? What if seeing her in her work uniform would remind him of the vast distance between their worlds? "You're glowing," Celia observed, restocking napkins beside the espresso machine. "Please tell me you didn't do something foolish." "Define foolish." "Leona," Celia grabbed her arm. "You went out with him, didn't you?" Before Leona could answer, the elevator doors opened. Julian stepped out, and the sight of him made her breath catch. He wore his usual business attire, but something was different, a lightness in his step, a softness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Their gazes met across the cafe, and his face broke into a smile so warm and genuine that Leona felt her doubts evaporate like steam. "Good morning," he said when he reached her counter, his voice carrying a note of intimacy that made her cheeks warm. "Good morning yourself." She reached for a cup, surprised by how steady her hands were. "The usual?" "Actually," Julian glanced around the moderately busy cafe, then leaned closer. "I was wondering if you might consider having lunch with me today." "Julian, I know what you're thinking, but hear me out." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. "There's a little park about 6 blocks from here. Food trucks, benches, completely public. You could bring your own lunch if you want. He paused, looking almost shy. "I'd like to see you again. Soon." Leona felt Celia's eyes boring into her back, along with the curious glances of other customers waiting in line. The smart thing would be to say no, to maintain professional boundaries, to protect herself from getting in too deep too fast. "Okay," she heard herself saying. "Okay? Piedmont Park, right? I know the food trucks. I can meet you there at 1. Julian's smile could have powered the entire building. I'll be the one sitting on a bench, probably overthinking everything. I'll find you. As he walked away with his coffee, Leona caught sight of Celia's expression, part concern, part curiosity, and a touch of something that might have been envy. Girl, you are in deep trouble, Celia muttered. Maybe, Leona admitted, but maybe that's not always a bad thing. Piedmont Park buzzed with the lunch crowd, office workers escaping fluorescent lights, joggers grabbing smoothies, families with small children feeding ducks by the pond. Leona spotted Julian immediately, sitting on a bench near the Korean BBQ truck, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. He had changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a navy pullover. The transformation was striking. Without the armor of expensive clothing, he looked younger, more approachable, more like the nervous teenager who had once burned pancakes at Millie's diner. You came, he said when she approached, standing with a smile that made her heart skip. Did you think I wouldn't? I worried you might change your mind, decide I was moving too fast or being too presumptuous. Leona settled beside him on the bench, noting how he was careful to leave space between them, close enough to talk easily, far enough to respect her boundaries. Are you moving too fast? Julian considered this seriously. Probably, but I've never been good at patience when it comes to something I want. And what is it you want? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Julian turned to face her fully, his dark eyes searching her face. Honestly, I want to know everything about you. What makes you laugh until your stomach hurts? What you dream about at 3 in the morning? Whether you're a morning person or a night owl, if you prefer mountains or beaches, what your favorite childhood memory is. He paused, running a hand through his hair. I want to understand how someone who has every reason to be bitter about life can still smile at strangers like they matter. The intensity in his voice made Leona's chest tighten. That's a lot to want from someone you barely know. But I do know you. Maybe not the details, but I know the important things. I know you're kind without expecting anything in return. I know you work harder than anyone should have just to survive. I know you dream of helping people, even when no one's helping you. His voice softened. I know you see me as a person, not a bank account. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Leona studied his face, seeing vulnerability there that took her breath away. It must be lonely. What? Never knowing if people like you for who you are or what you have. Julian was quiet for a long moment. It is, he said finally, more than I usually let myself admit. They sat in comfortable silence, watching a young mother chase her toddler around the playground. The scene was so normal, so far removed from the complexity of their situation, that Leona felt herself relax for the first time all day. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Last night, at Millie's, that wasn't an act, was it? The stories about working there, being terrible at the job at first, every embarrassing detail was true. Julian smiled ruefully. Why? Because it helped me understand you better. The real you, not the billionaire version. She turned to face him. But I need to know, which one is this? Right now, sitting here with me? This is me, Julian said without hesitation. The most me I've been in years, actually. Good, Leona said softly, because that's who I'm interested in getting to know. Something shifted in Julian's expression, relief, gratitude, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. Leona, yeah? Would it be completely inappropriate if I said I'm falling for you? Her breath caught. The words hung in the air between them, honest and terrifying and beautiful. Probably, she whispered. But I might be falling for you too. Julian's intake of breath was audible. Might be? Okay, definitely am. The admission felt like jumping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying at once, which scares me more than I can tell you. Why? Because this is crazy, Julian. We're from completely different worlds. I make coffee for a living and you own buildings. I shop at thrift stores and you probably spend more on lunch than I make in a week. People are going to think, I don't care what people think. But I do. The words came out more forcefully than she intended. I care that your friends will assume I'm after your money. I care that people at work will think I'm sleeping my way to better tips. I care that my mum will worry I'm setting myself up to get hurt. Julian was quiet, processing her fears. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. What if I told you none of that matters to me? What if I said I'd rather have 5 minutes of real conversation with you than a lifetime of small talk with people who only see my net worth? I'd say that's easy for you to claim when you're not the one who'll be judged. You're right, Julian admitted. It is easier for me. But Leona, he shifted closer, not quite touching her but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. What if we figured it out together? What if we took this one day at a time and didn't worry about what anyone else thinks? Leona looked into his eyes, seeing sincerity there and hope, and something that looked suspiciously like love. One day at a time? One day at a time. She took a deep breath, feeling like she was standing at the edge of something that would change her life forever. "Okay," she said quietly, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "No expensive gifts. No fancy restaurants I can't afford to return the favor at, and absolutely no trying to solve my problems with money." Julian nodded seriously. "Agreed. Anything else? Be patient with me. This is all new territory. I have all the time in the world." As they sat there in the afternoon sun, surrounded by the ordinary magic of people living their lives, Leona felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty, it was too soon for that, but possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, love could bridge any distance if both people were willing to meet in the middle. "Julian, Thank you for being patient, for not pushing, for letting me be scared." He turned to look at her, his eyes soft with understanding. "Thank you for being brave enough to try anyway." When they parted ways an hour later, him back to his corporate world, her to the afternoon cafe rush, Leona carried with her the memory of his smile and the warmth of knowing that tomorrow, at 9:47 a.m., she would see him again. And for the first time since this all began, she wasn't afraid of what that might mean. As Leona and Julian navigate their growing feelings, what challenges will test their fragile new connection? And when does falling in love become a leap of faith neither can take back? The first crack in paradise always comes when the real world refuses to stay outside. 3 weeks had passed since their lunch in Piedmont Park, and Leona had fallen into a rhythm she hadn't known she was capable of. Every morning at 9:47, Julian would appear at her counter. They would exchange coffee and careful smiles, saving their real conversations for stolen moments, lunch breaks in quiet corners of the city, evening walks through her neighborhood, Saturday afternoons at the farmer's market, where he insisted on buying produce from vendors who knew her by name. It was a careful dance, this thing growing between them, respectful touches, lingering looks, conversations that revealed pieces of their souls without demanding too much too soon. Julian had kept every promise he'd made in the park. No expensive gifts, no attempts to solve her problems with money, infinite patience with her fears. But on this particular Tuesday morning, something felt different. Leona noticed it immediately when Julian approached her counter. The easy warmth in his eyes had been replaced by something tighter, more guarded. His smile seemed forced, and there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there yesterday. "The usual?" she asked, studying his face. "Actually, make it to go today." His voice was clipped, professional in a way that made her stomach drop. "Everything okay?" Julian glanced around the cafe, noting the other customers, the curious looks from Celia and Marcus. "Can we talk later, maybe lunch?" "Of course, same place?" He nodded, paid for his coffee, and left without their usual lingering moment of connection. Leona watched him walk to the elevators, her chest tight with worry. "Trouble in paradise?" Celia asked, appearing beside her with raised eyebrows. "I don't know," Leona admitted. "Maybe." When Leona arrived at their usual bench in Piedmont Park, Julian was already there, staring at his phone with an expression she couldn't read. Today he wore a full suit. Armor, she realized. Whatever had happened, he had retreated behind his corporate facade. "Hey," she said softly, settling beside him. "Hi." He didn't look up from his phone immediately, and when he did, his smile didn't reach his eyes. "What's wrong?" Julian was quiet for a long moment, running his thumb along the edge of his phone. "Someone took pictures of us at the farmer's market last Saturday." Leona felt the blood drain from her face. "Pictures? They're on a gossip blog. Atlanta real estate mogul's secret romance with coffee shop worker." His voice was flat, matter of fact, complete with speculation about whether you're after my money and how long it will take for me to get bored and move on. The words hit Leona like physical blows. This was exactly what she had been afraid of, the reduction of whatever they had to a cheap tabloid story. Her motives questioned, their private moments turned into public entertainment. "What did they say about me?" she asked quietly. Julian's jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter, Julian." "What did they say?" He closed his eyes briefly as if the words caused him pain. "They called you Julian Mercer's latest charity case and suggested you were trading coffee for cash. There was speculation about how much I'm paying you and—" He stopped, shaking his head. "And what? And whether I have a fetish for slumming it with the help." Leona felt like she'd been slapped. The ugly words hung in the air between them, poisoning the sanctuary they had built together. She had known this was a possibility, but knowing and experiencing were two very different things. "I'm so sorry," Julian said, his voice raw. "I should have been more careful. I should have anticipated this. Have you seen the pictures?" He hesitated, then showed her his phone. There they were, candid shots of them at the farmer's market. Her laughing at something he had said while examining peaches. Him carrying her bags, looking at her with obvious affection. The images themselves were innocent, even sweet, but the accompanying text turned them into something sordid. "We look happy," Leona said quietly. "We were happy." The past tense made her look up sharply. "Were?" Julian ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly defeated. "Leona, I can't ask you to go through this. These people, they're ruthless. They'll dig into your life, your family, your past. They'll follow you, harass you, turn every private moment into public speculation. You're protecting me. I'm trying to. By breaking up with me?" The words hung between them, heavy with finality. Julian's silence was answer enough. Leona stood abruptly, anger and hurt warring in her chest. "So that's it? The first sign of real-world consequences and you just give up? That's not fair. Isn't it?" She turned to face him, tears burning behind her eyes. "You said you didn't care what people thought. You said we'd figure it out together. You said you had all the time in the world." Julian stood too, his own emotions finally breaking through the corporate mask. "I said those things before I realized what this would cost you. Before I saw your name dragged through the mud by people who don't even know you. That's my choice to make." "Is it? Really?" His voice rose slightly. "When your co-workers start treating you differently, when your neighbors whisper about you, when your mother has to hear strangers speculating about her daughter's sex life." The mention of her mother hit home, and Julian saw it in her expression. "You called my mom." Leona's voice was barely a whisper. "God, no. But Leona, this is just the beginning. These stories have a way of spreading, growing, getting worse. I've seen what happens to people who get caught in this machine. I won't let that happen to you, even if I'm willing to risk it." Especially then. They stared at each other across the growing chasm of hurt and misunderstanding. Leona could see the pain in Julian's eyes, the genuine belief that he was protecting her. But all she felt was abandonment disguised as nobility. "You know what the worst part is," she said quietly. "It's not the article or the pictures or even the horrible things they wrote about me. What is it? It's that you believed them. Deep down, some part of you thinks they might be right. That maybe I'm just a coffee shop worker who got in over her head. That maybe this was all a mistake. That's not true, isn't it?" Tears were flowing freely now, but her voice remained steady. "Because if you truly believed in us, in what we have, you wouldn't be giving up at the first obstacle." Julian stepped toward her, his own composure cracking. "Leona, please. You don't understand what this world is like. The things they'll do, the lies they'll tell. You're right. I don't understand your world." She backed away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. "But I thought maybe you were trying to understand mine. I thought maybe we were building something that belonged to both of us." We are." "No, Julian, we're not." The finality in her voice made him flinch. "Because the first time your world and mine collided, you chose your world." Before he could respond, Leona turned and walked away, her heart breaking with every step. She didn't look back, even when she heard him call her name. As she sat on the bus ride back to work, staring out the window at the city that had suddenly become hostile territory, Leona realized that her worst fear hadn't been the gossip or the judgment. It had been this, loving someone who would choose protecting her over fighting for her. And now she knew that sometimes the most painful lesson wasn't learning that love wasn't enough. It was learning that fear, disguised as protection, could destroy everything love had built. That evening, alone in her apartment, Leona did something she hadn't done since she was a child. She cried until she couldn't breathe, and then she cried some more, because losing Julian hurt. But losing her faith in the possibility that someone could love her enough to weather any storm, that was devastating. Sometimes the deepest wounds teach us who we really are and what we're truly worth fighting for. 2 weeks had passed since the conversation in Piedmont Park, and Leona felt like she was living in a world drained of color. The cafe routine continued. Coffee orders, morning rushes, forced smiles, but everything felt mechanical, distant, like she was watching someone else's life through thick glass. Julian hadn't returned to the cafe, not once. At first, she had caught herself glancing toward the elevators at 9:47 a.m., her heart doing that familiar flutter before reality crashed back. By the end of the first week, she had trained herself not to look. By the second week, she had almost convinced herself she didn't care. Almost. "You're doing it again," Celia observed, sliding a fresh pot of coffee toward Leona during the Tuesday morning lull. "Doing what?" "That thing where you pretend you're fine while looking like someone stole your favorite song." Leona managed a weak smile. "I'm fine." "Girl, please. You've been walking around here like a ghost. When's the last time you ate an actual meal? And don't say coffee and crackers count." Before Leona could deflect, Marcus appeared from the back office, his expression unusually serious. "Leona, can I see you for a minute?" Her stomach dropped. In 2 years of working here, Marcus had never called her into the office. She followed him into the cramped space behind the storage room, her mind racing through possible infractions. "Sit down," Marcus said gently, closing the door behind them. "Marcus, if this is about my attitude lately, I know I've been—" "It's not about your attitude." He settled into his chair, studying her with kind eyes. "Someone came to see me yesterday. About you." Leona's blood ran cold. "What kind of someone?" "The kind that wears expensive suits and owns buildings." Marcus leaned forward. "Julian Mercer came by after closing, asked if he could speak with me privately." The world tilted slightly. "He was here. He was worried about you. Said there might be some unwanted attention coming your way because you two had been seeing each other." Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. "He wanted to make sure you were protected, offered to hire additional security for the cafe if needed." Leona closed her eyes, a mixture of anger and heartbreak washing over her. Even now, even after walking away, Julian was still trying to protect her, still making decisions about her life without consulting her. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that you're a grown woman who can handle her own affairs, but I also told him that if anyone hassles you at work, they'll have to deal with me." Marcus smiled slightly. He seemed to respect that. Did he say anything else?" Marcus hesitated. "He asked how you were doing, if you seemed okay. I told him you were professional as always, but—" He studied her face. "Leona, what happened between you two?" The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. Marcus had always been more than a boss. He was a friend, a father figure, who looked out for his employees like family. "He decided I couldn't handle his world," she said quietly. "So he made the decision for me." "And how do you feel about that?" "Angry, hurt, confused." She laughed bitterly. "Mostly angry that I let myself believe it could work." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been managing this cafe for 8 years. I've seen a lot of people come and go, watched a lot of relationships start and end, and I've learned something important." "What's that?" "The people worth fighting for are usually the ones most afraid of being fought for." Before Leona could process that statement fully, Marcus stood up. "Take the rest of the day off. Go home, eat a real meal, get some perspective. And Leona, yeah, whatever you decide about this situation, make sure it's your decision, not his, not mine, not anyone else's. Yours." Leona found herself walking aimlessly through downtown Atlanta, Marcus's words echoing in her head. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings, and for the first time in 2 weeks, she allowed herself to really think about Julian. Not the billionaire who owned half the city, not the man who had been reduced to gossip column fodder. Just Julian, the person who had worked at Millie's diner, who had listened to her dreams with genuine interest, who had looked at her like she hung the moon. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Haven't heard from you in a few days, sweetheart. Everything okay?" Instead of her usual deflection, Leona found herself calling, "Mom, can I come over? I need to talk." 2 hours later, Leona sat in her mother's small living room, tea growing cold in her hands while she told the whole story. Her mother listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "So he walked away to protect you," her mother said when Leona finished. "He gave up on us. Or he loves you so much that he's willing to sacrifice his own happiness for what he believes is your well-being." Leona looked up sharply. "Whose side are you on?" Her mother smiled, the same gentle expression that had comforted Leona through skinned knees and teenage heartbreaks. "I'm on the side of love, baby. Always have been. But he hurt me." "Yes, he did, and I suspect he's hurting too." Her mother leaned forward. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" "He made his choice." "Did he? Or did he make what he thought was the only choice available?" Her mother studied Leona's face. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is show someone there's another option." That night, Leona lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, her mother's words playing on repeat. She thought about all the conversations she and Julian had shared, all the moments when he had seemed genuinely surprised by her responses, as if no one had ever challenged his assumptions before. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe Julian was so used to making unilateral decisions, so accustomed to his wealth and power giving him control over outcomes, that he couldn't imagine any other way. Maybe he needed someone to show him that love wasn't about protection, it was about partnership. The next morning, Leona arrived at work with a determination she hadn't felt in weeks. She moved through her morning routine with renewed energy, greeting customers with genuine smiles, laughing with Celia about inconsequential things. At 9:47 a.m., the elevator doors opened, and her heart leaped before she could stop it. But it wasn't Julian who stepped out. It was a woman in an immaculate designer suit, her silver hair perfectly styled, her bearing radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having to question her place in the world. The woman approached Leona's counter with purposeful strides, and something in her expression made Leona's stomach clench with apprehension. "You must be Leona Brooks," the woman said, her voice cultured, controlled. "Yes, ma'am. Can I help you?" "I'm Vivian Mercer, Julian's mother." The introduction hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Leona felt the cafe around her fade into background noise. This was Julian's mother, the woman who had raised him in a world of privilege and expectation, who had probably never set foot in a place like this cafe. "I'm working," Leona said carefully. "Then perhaps you could take a break. This won't take long." Vivian's smile was polite but sharp. "I promise it will be worth your time." Every instinct told Leona to refuse, to maintain her dignity and send this woman away. But something in Vivian's expression, not cruelty exactly, but a kind of ruthless curiosity, made her hesitate. "Give me 5 minutes," Leona said finally. As she untied her apron, her hands trembling slightly, Leona wondered if she was about to face the final destruction of whatever remained of her connection to Julian, or if this unexpected encounter might somehow be the key to fighting for what they had lost. Either way, she was about to find out exactly what Julian's world thought of her, and what she was willing to do to prove them wrong. Sometimes, the greatest enemy of love is the person who thinks they know what's best for everyone else. Vivian Mercer sat across from Leona at a small table near the cafe's window, her posture perfect, her hands folded elegantly over a purse that probably cost more than Leona's monthly salary. Everything about Julian's mother radiated control and expectation, from her pearl earrings to the way she studied Leona like a problem to be solved. "You're different than I expected," Vivian said. After ordering tea she clearly had no intention of drinking. "Different how?" "Prettier. More composed." Vivian's smile was razor-sharp. Julian's previous dalliances have been somewhat more obvious in their intentions. The word dalliances hit Leona like a slap, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Of course you do. You're clearly intelligent. That much is obvious from the way my son has been moping around for 2 weeks like a lovesick teenager." Vivian leaned forward slightly. "The question is, are you intelligent enough to understand what's best for everyone involved?" Leona felt anger bubbling in her chest, but forced herself to remain calm. "Why don't you tell me what you think is best? Julian ends this fascination before it destroys both of your lives. And you think I'm the one who needs convincing?" Vivian's eyebrows rose slightly, as if surprised by Leona's directness. "Julian has always been stubborn when he wants something, but he's also practical. Eventually he'll realize that this relationship is unsustainable. Because I'm not good enough for him. Because you live in different worlds." Vivian's voice softened slightly, taking on an almost maternal tone. "My dear, I don't doubt that you care for Julian, but surely you can see how this ends. The media attention will only get worse. Your family will be scrutinized, your past examined, your every move analyzed. Is that the life you want?" Leona studied the older woman's face, seeing genuine concern beneath the polished exterior. This wasn't just snobbery. This was a mother protecting her child in the only way she knew how. "What if I said yes?" Leona asked quietly. "What if I said I was willing to handle all of that for the chance to be with him? Then I would say you don't understand the full cost." Vivian reached into her purse and pulled out a tablet, sliding it across the table. "These are just from the past 2 weeks. Leona looked at the screen and felt her stomach drop. Article after article, blog post after forum discussion, all dissecting her relationship with Julian. Photos of her apartment building with speculation about the rent. Pictures of her mother leaving work with captions, questioning her employment status. comments from anonymous sources claiming to know details about Leona's past, her finances, her character. "This is what loving my son looks like," Vivian said softly. "And this is only the beginning. If you stay together, if this becomes serious, they'll dig deeper. They'll find every mistake you've ever made, every vulnerable moment, every person who ever had a negative thing to say about you. They'll turn your life into entertainment." Leona's hands trembled as she scrolled through the articles. Seeing her private life dissected by strangers, seeing her mother's face attached to cruel speculation, made her feel nauseated. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Julian won't. He's too noble, too protective. He thinks shielding you from this will somehow make it go away." Vivian's voice grew firmer. "But you're an adult. You deserve to make an informed decision about what you're willing to sacrifice for love." Leona looked up from the tablet, meeting Vivian's eyes. "And what are you willing to sacrifice?" The question seemed to catch Julian's mother off guard. "Excuse me? Julian is miserable. I can see it in the way you talk about him moping around. He's sacrificing his happiness because he thinks it's protecting me. You're willing to let him be miserable because you think it's protecting him. But what if we're all wrong? About what? About what protection really means?" Leona leaned forward, her voice growing stronger. "Maybe real protection isn't avoiding difficult situations. Maybe it's facing them together." Vivian was quiet for a long moment, studying Leona with new interest. "You really believe that?" "I believe that love is supposed to make you braver, not more afraid." "And what about when that bravery puts the people you love in harm's way?" The question hung between them, loaded with years of a mother's fears and protectiveness. Leona could see the genuine pain in Vivian's eyes, the terror of watching her child suffer, even for love. "Mrs. Mercer," Leona said gently, "has Julian ever been truly happy? I mean, genuinely, completely happy." Vivian's composure cracked slightly. "He's been content, successful, respected, but happy?" A long pause. "Not since he was a child." "Then maybe the question isn't whether I'm worth the risk. Maybe it's whether happiness is worth the risk." Vivian stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You really do love him?" "Yes, I do. Even knowing what it will cost you." Leona thought about the articles on the tablet, about the cruel comments and invasive speculation. She thought about her mother's face in those photos, about the way her private life had already been turned into public entertainment. "Mrs. Mercer, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think Julian is worth fighting for?" The question seemed to surprise Vivian. "He's my son, of course I do." "Then why won't you let me fight for him too?" Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Finally, Vivian smiled, a real smile this time, soft around the edges. "You know, I think I may have underestimated you. Most people do. Julian doesn't, does he?" "No," Leona said softly. "He never has." Vivian closed the tablet and slipped it back into her purse. "What do you plan to do?" "I don't know yet, but I know what I'm not going to do, which is give up without a fight." Leona met Vivian's eyes steadily. "Your son thinks he's protecting me by walking away, but the truth is, he's protecting himself. He's afraid of what loving me might cost him, not in money or reputation, but in peace of mind. He's afraid of caring about someone he can't completely control or shield from the world." Vivian considered this. "And you think that's cowardly?" "I think it's human, but I also think love requires a different kind of courage. The courage to be vulnerable. The courage to trust that the person you love is strong enough to handle their own choices." When Vivian stood to leave, she paused beside Leona's chair. "You know, I came here expecting to dislike you, to find an opportunist or a naive girl in over her head. And instead I found someone who might actually be good for my son." Vivian's smile was enigmatic. "Though I suspect you'll be quite bad for his peace of mind." "Probably." "Good. He's been far too comfortable for far too long." As Vivian walked away, leaving Leona alone with her racing thoughts, she realized something important had just happened. She had been tested, not by someone who wanted to destroy her relationship with Julian, but by someone who wanted to make sure she was strong enough to survive it. And for the first time since the photograph scandal began, Leona felt like she might be. That evening, she sat in her small apartment with a notebook and pen, making a list, not of reasons why loving Julian was impossible, but of reasons why it was worth the fight. At the top of the page, she wrote, "Because some things are worth being brave for." Tomorrow, she would show Julian what real courage looked like, even if it terrified her. The moment when everything changes isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as someone refusing to give up on you. Julian stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, watching the city sprawl below him like a chessboard where he had forgotten how to play. 3 weeks had passed since he had walked away from Leona, and every day felt like a slow suffocation. He had convinced himself he was doing the right thing, the noble thing, the protective thing. So why did noble feel so much like cowardice? His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Mercer, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." Julian closed his eyes, hoping against hope. Did she give a name? Leona Brooks. His heart stopped, restarted, then began racing like he had just run a marathon. "Send her up." Julian caught his reflection in the black computer screen and was startled by what he saw. Hollow eyes, sharp cheekbones that spoke of too many skipped meals, the look of a man who had been holding his breath for weeks. The elevator dinged, and then she was there. Leona stood in his office doorway wearing her simple work clothes, black pants, white button-down shirt, hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked nervous but determined, like someone who had spent a long time gathering courage and was afraid it might abandon her at the crucial moment. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." His voice came out rougher than intended. "You're not supposed to be here. I know. It's not safe. If someone sees you—" "Julian." She stepped into his office, closing the door behind her. "I need you to stop talking and listen for a minute." The quiet authority in her voice made him fall silent. Leona walked to the center of the room, taking in the opulent space, the marble surfaces, the expensive art, the view that stretched for miles. This was his world, the fortress he had built around himself. "Impressive," she said, but there was no awe in her voice. "This is where you make all those important decisions, right? Where you decide what's best for everyone else." Julian winced. "Leona, I met your mother yesterday." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What?" "She came to the cafe, showed me articles, pictures, comments about us, wanted to make sure I understood what I was getting into." Leona's voice was steady, but he could see the pain beneath her composure. "She was trying to protect you, just like you were trying to protect me." "Did she hurt you? Say something?" "She was actually quite kind in her own way, but that's not why I'm here." Leona moved closer, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of vanilla and coffee that always clung to her skin. "I'm here because I have something to say and you're going to listen." Julian nodded, not trusting his voice. 3 weeks ago, you made a decision about my life without consulting me. You decided I couldn't handle the pressure, the scrutiny, the cost of loving you. You decided I was too fragile, too naive, too small for your world. Each word was a precision cut, laying bare truths he had tried to avoid. "That's not—" "Let me finish." Her eyes flashed with something between hurt and anger. "How you said you loved me, but love isn't supposed to be about control, Julian. It's supposed to be about trust. I was trying to protect you. From what? From making my own choices? From being strong enough to handle difficult things?" She stepped even closer, and he could see tears gathering in her eyes. "Or were you protecting yourself from having to watch me struggle?" The question hung between them like a blade. Julian felt something crack inside his chest, the careful wall he had built to justify his decision. "Both," he whispered. "God help me, both. At least you're honest." Leona's voice softened slightly. "Julian, I won't lie to you. These past 3 weeks have been horrible. Seeing my private life turned into entertainment, watching strangers speculate about my mother, having people question my motives for caring about you. It's been awful." Julian closed his eyes, each word confirming his worst fears. "But do you know what's been worse?" He looked at her, afraid of the answer. "Missing you. Missing us. Missing the way you looked at me like I mattered. Missing the conversations that made me feel less alone in the world." Tears spilled over now, but her voice remained strong. "Missing the man who made me believe I was brave enough to dream bigger." "Leona." He reached for her instinctively, then stopped, his hand hanging in the air between them. "I'm not asking you to fix this, Julian. I'm not asking you to make the media attention go away or shield me from every consequence. I'm asking you to trust that I'm strong enough to handle my own life. You are. You're the strongest person I know. Then why won't you let me prove it?" The question broke something loose inside him, all the fear, all the guilt, all the desperate longing he had been trying to suppress. Julian crossed the remaining distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. "Because losing you would destroy me," he said, his voice raw with honesty. "Because I've never loved anyone the way I love you, and I don't know how to do it without trying to control every variable, fix every problem, eliminate every threat." "You can't eliminate every threat, Julian. Life doesn't work that way. I know, but the thought of watching you suffer because of me, because of my world, because of choices I made." He shook his head. "I'd rather be miserable alone than put you through that. But that's not your choice to make." She covered his hands with hers, holding them against her face. "That's mine, and I choose you, Julian. I choose us. Even with the media attention, even with the judgment, even with your mother's concerns and the difference in our bank accounts, I choose this. What if I can't protect you? I don't need you to protect me. I need you to stand beside me. What if it gets worse? What if? Then we'll figure it out together. That's what love is, isn't it? Facing whatever comes as a team." Julian stared into her eyes, seeing determination there, and courage, and something that looked suspiciously like certainty. For 3 weeks he had been so focused on all the ways this could go wrong that he had forgotten the most important question. What if it went right? "I've been an idiot," he said finally. "Yes, you have. A stubborn, controlling, cowardly idiot." "Don't forget arrogant," Leona added, but she was smiling through her tears. "I'm sorry. God, Leona, I'm so sorry. I thought I was being noble, but I was just scared. I know. I missed you every single day." "Good. You should have." Julian laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in weeks. "What do I have to do to earn another chance? Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that the next time you're scared about us, about what we're facing, you'll talk to me instead of making decisions for me. I promise. Promise me you'll trust that I'm strong enough to handle whatever comes. I promise. And promise me you'll remember that love isn't about avoiding all the hard things. It's about facing them together." Julian pulled her into his arms then, holding her tight against his chest, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling like he could finally breathe again for the first time in weeks. "I promise," he whispered into her ear. "I promise all of it." They stood there in his office high above the city, holding each other like lifelines, and Julian realized that this moment of choosing trust over fear, partnership over protection, was what real courage looked like. "So what now?" he asked when they finally pulled apart. Leona smiled, the expression transforming her entire face. "Now we figure out how to do this right, together. The media attention won't just disappear. I know. People will say terrible things. Let them. My world can be harsh, demanding, unforgiving. Then we'll change the parts we can and survive the parts we can't." She reached up and straightened his tie, a gesture so intimate and natural it made his chest tight. "Besides, I have something they don't expect." "What's that?" "You. A man who's finally ready to fight for what matters, instead of just fighting against what scares him." As Julian looked into Leona's eyes, he saw their future stretched out before them. Not perfect, certainly not easy, but real and worth every challenge they would face. And for the first time in his adult life, Julian Mercer understood what it meant to be truly, completely brave. The moment you stop hiding from love is the moment you discover who you're truly meant to become. 6 months later, Leona stood in the bathroom of her new apartment, still modest, still hers, but in a building where the hot water actually worked consistently, staring at an acceptance letter that had arrived that morning. The header read, "Atlanta School of Nursing" in bold blue letters, and below it words that still didn't feel real. "Congratulations on your acceptance to our accelerated BSN program." She had done it, without Julian's money, without anyone's help except her own determination and the savings she had accumulated from working double shifts and careful budgeting. The application fee had come from her own pocket, the entrance exam scores from her own studying, the letters of recommendation from Marcus and regular customers who had witnessed her kindness over 2 years of coffee service. The apartment door opened, and Julian's voice called out, "Leona, I brought dinner from that Thai place you like." He stopped short when he appeared in the bathroom doorway, taking in her expression and the letter in her hands. "What is it?" "I got in." Her voice was barely a whisper, as if saying it too loudly might make it disappear. Julian's face transformed, joy radiating from him like sunlight. "You got in? Nursing school?" "I got in." This time she said it with conviction, with pride, with the kind of wonder that comes from achieving something you've dreamed about for years. He crossed the small space in 2 strides, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the tiny bathroom, while she laughed and clutched the letter to her chest. "I'm so proud of you," he said, when he finally set her down, his hands cupping her face with the gentleness she had come to treasure. "So incredibly proud." "I did it myself," she said, needing him to understand. I mean, I know you offered, and you said no, because you needed to know you could do it on your own. Julian's smile was soft, understanding. And you did, you amazing, stubborn, brilliant woman. The past 6 months had been a journey neither of them could have anticipated. After their reconciliation in his office, they had faced the world together, weathering more media attention, curious stares, and whispered comments. But they had also discovered something powerful. When two people truly support each other, external opinions lose most of their sting. Julian had learned to step back, to offer support without overwhelming, to trust Leona's strength instead of trying to shield her from every challenge. Leona had learned to accept help when she needed it, to communicate her fears instead of shouldering them alone, to believe that her dreams were worth pursuing even when they seemed impossible. "There's something else," Julian said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I was going to wait until after dinner, but—" He pulled out a small velvet box, and Leona's breath caught. "Julian, I know it's only been 6 months since we got back together. I know we've talked about taking things slow, building a foundation based on trust instead of just attraction." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring, not ostentatious, not a declaration of wealth, but beautiful in its understated grace. "But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams, celebrating your victories, and facing whatever challenges come our way together." Leona stared at the ring, then at Julian's face. Seeing nervousness there alongside hope and love so profound, it took her breath away. "I'm not asking you to give up anything," he continued. "Not nursing school, not your independence, not your fierce determination to make your own way in the world. I'm asking if you'll let me be part of that journey. As your partner, your equal, your—" He smiled, suddenly looking young and vulnerable. "Your husband, if you'll have me." Julian. Tears were flowing freely now, but they were good tears. Joy tears. Tears that spoke of dreams coming true in ways she had never dared imagine. "I love your strength. I love your compassion. I love the way you make everyone around you feel seen and valued. I love that you spell my name wrong on coffee cups and somehow make that feel like the most romantic gesture in the world." His voice was thick with emotion. "I love that you chose to fight for us when I was too scared to fight for myself." Leona looked at this man who had learned to love without controlling, who had chosen vulnerability over protection, who had supported her dreams without trying to take credit for them. "What took you so long?" she whispered. Julian's laugh was shaky with relief. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." She held out her left hand, watching through tears as he slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "We finish this together. Nursing school, building your business, figuring out how to blend our worlds without losing ourselves. All of it. Deal. And when people ask how we met, we tell them the truth, that love found us in a coffee shop when we were both brave enough to see each other as more than the roles we played." "Perfect. And Julian?" "Yeah? The next time you want to protect me from something, you better talk to me first." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I promise. No more unilateral decisions. No more sacrificing our happiness for some misguided notion of protection." "Good. Because I plan to spend the next 50 years challenging every assumption you've ever made about what's possible. I'm counting on it." They stood there in the small bathroom of her modest apartment, surrounded by the ordinary details of a life built on love and mutual respect. Toothbrushes in a cup, towels that didn't match, a nursing school acceptance letter that represented years of dreaming and working and refusing to give up. It wasn't the fairy tale ending that movies promised, with grand gestures and unlimited resources solving every problem. It was something better, real love between two people who had learned that the greatest luxury wasn't wealth or status, but finding someone willing to face life's complexities alongside you. "So," Julian said, pressing a soft kiss to her temple, "what do you want to do first? Celebrate the engagement or celebrate nursing school?" Leona smiled, feeling like her heart might burst from happiness. "Why not both? We're good at doing impossible things together. We are, aren't we?" As they walked hand in hand toward the kitchen, where takeout containers waited and the future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility, Leona thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a misspelled name on a coffee cup to this moment of choosing each other completely, it had been a testament to the power of seeing someone truly and loving them, not despite their imperfections, but because of their authentic humanity. They had learned that real love wasn't about avoiding challenges, it was about facing them together, with courage born of trust and commitment deeper than fear. And in a world that often measured worth by wealth and status, they had discovered something infinitely more valuable, a partnership built on respect, understanding, and the radical act of choosing each other every single day. Outside, Atlanta glittered in the evening light, full of other love stories waiting to unfold, other coffee shops where strangers might become everything to each other, other moments when someone might be brave enough to spell a name wrong and change two lives forever. But inside their small apartment, surrounded by the simple magic of shared dreams and mutual devotion, Julian and Leona had already found everything they needed: each other. 3 years later, the morning light filtered through the windows of the pediatric ward at Grady Memorial Hospital, casting gentle shadows across the colorful murals that Leona had helped paint during her first month as a registered nurse. She moved quietly between the beds, checking on her small patients with the same careful attention she had once given to coffee orders. But now her kindness had the power to heal rather than simply comfort. "Nurse Leona," called out Tyler, a 7-year-old recovering from appendix surgery, "when can I go home?" "When Dr. Patterson says you're ready, sweet boy," she replied, adjusting his blanket with gentle hands. "But I heard someone mention ice cream for lunch if you keep being brave." Tyler's face lit up, and Leona felt that familiar warmth that came from making a difference in someone's day. It was the same feeling she used to get from serving the perfect cup of coffee to a stressed customer, magnified tenfold. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Lunch at our place? I'm making grilled cheese. Badly, but with love." She smiled, typing back, "I'll bring the soup and bandages for whatever you've burned this time." "How did you know I burned something?" "Because I know you. See you at 1. 3 years of marriage had taught them both the beauty of ordinary moments. Julian had indeed learned to cook, poorly but enthusiastically, while Leona had learned to accept help without feeling like she was surrendering her independence. They lived in a modest house in Virginia Highland, close enough to both their workplaces, with a garden where Julian grew tomatoes with the same intensity he once applied to real estate deals. The media attention had eventually faded, replaced by newer scandals and fresher gossip. But more importantly, they had learned to create a life that belonged entirely to them, built on shared values rather than external validation, measured in moments of connection rather than public opinion. "Mrs. Mercer?" Dr. Patterson appeared beside her, using the name that still made Leona's heart skip slightly. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" They stepped into the hallway, and Leona noticed the barely contained excitement in the older doctor's expression. "I wanted to let you know that the hospital board approved your proposal," Dr. Patterson said with a smile. "The family support program for pediatric patients will launch next month, with you as the coordinator." Leona felt tears spring to her eyes. For months, she had been developing a program to help families navigate the emotional and practical challenges of having a child in long-term care. It was born from watching too many parents struggle alone, feeling lost in a system that focused on medical needs while sometimes overlooking human ones. "Really? They approved the funding?" "They did, though I suspect a certain anonymous donor's contribution didn't hurt." Dr. Patterson's knowing smile suggested she wasn't entirely fooled by Julian's attempt at secrecy. Leona shook her head, already planning the conversation she would have with her husband about making decisions without consulting her. But beneath the mock irritation was profound gratitude, not for the money, but for the way Julian had learned to support her dreams without trying to take credit for them. Her shift ended at 3 p.m., and she drove home through the familiar streets of Atlanta, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. The small house came into view, white-clabbered with blue shutters, a front porch where they drank coffee on weekend mornings. A life that looked nothing like the fairy tale ending she used to imagine, but felt infinitely more real. Julian was indeed in the kitchen, surveying what appeared to be the aftermath of a culinary disaster. Smoke hung faintly in the air, and she could see charred remains of grilled cheese in the sink. "Don't say anything," he warned, pointing a spatula at her. "I wasn't going to say anything. You were thinking it very loudly." Leona laughed, walking into his arms and breathing in the scent of smoke and aftershave that somehow smelled like home. "I was thinking that I love you, even if you can't make grilled cheese without setting off smoke detectors." In my defense, the bread was thicker than usual. "Sure it was." She pulled back to look at him, noting the small scar above his left eyebrow from a cooking accident 6 months ago, the laugh lines that had deepened since they met, the contentment in his eyes that spoke of a man who had found exactly where he belonged. "Julian? Yeah? Thank you for the donation, for believing in the program." His expression grew serious. "How did you—" Dr. Patterson may have mentioned an anonymous donor. You're many things, but subtle isn't one of them. Julian had the grace to look sheepish. I know we agreed no more financial surprises, but this was different. This wasn't about solving your problems. It was about amplifying something you were already creating. She studied his face, seeing the careful distinction he was making, appreciating how much they had both grown in learning to navigate the complex dynamics of love across different economic realities. Next time, talk to me first? Next time, I'll talk to you first. Good. Because we're partners in this life, remember? Partners, he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like home and possibility, and the kind of love that grew stronger with time rather than dimmer. That evening, they sat on their front porch, watching the sun set over Atlanta, Leona's head on Julian's shoulder, both of them reading, she a nursing journal, he a book about sustainable development that had nothing to do with real estate and everything to do with the man he was becoming. Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't misspelled my name that first day? Julian asked, his fingers absently stroking her hair. Every day, Leona replied. But then I think about how many small moments led us here. Your mother's visit to the cafe, my decision to fight for us, your willingness to let you what? To let me love you without changing who you are. They sat in comfortable silence, watching neighbors walk their dogs and children ride bicycles in the fading light. This was their life now. Not perfect, certainly not without challenges, but real in ways that sustained them through difficult days and made joyful ones even sweeter. Julian's phone buzzed with a work email, but he ignored it, choosing instead to pull Leona closer. I have something to tell you, she said softly. Good something or concerning something? Wonderful something. She turned in his arms, meeting his eyes in the golden evening light. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them, transforming everything and nothing at once. Julian's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, joy, wonder, and finally the kind of overwhelming love that made tears spring to his eyes. Pregnant, he whispered. 8 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you. We're going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby. Julian kissed her then, soft and reverent, as if she were something precious and miraculous, which Leona thought maybe she was. Maybe they both were. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I love you and our baby, and this life we've built together. Even if it's not what you expected when you walked into that coffee shop? Especially because it's not what I expected. Julian smiled, his hand moving to rest gently on her still flat stomach. The best things in life are usually the ones that surprise us. As night fell over Atlanta, they remained on their porch, planning and dreaming and marveling at the way love could transform two strangers into a family. Inside the house, wedding photos sat beside Leona's nursing degree, Julian's business awards next to Leona's patient thank you cards, a visual representation of two lives beautifully intertwined. The coffee shop where they met still operated in Pinnacle Tower. Sometimes they stopped by, ordering from whoever was working the morning shift, remembering the people they used to be and marveling at who they had become. But mostly, they looked forward, to the child who would carry both their dreams, to the family they would build on foundations of respect and genuine love, to all the ordinary miracles waiting to unfold in a life chosen consciously, courageously, together. Leona still returned to the same cafe sometimes, but now she went with a light step and a full heart, carrying Julian's love and their future child, knowing that some love stories don't end, they just keep beginning, one brave choice at a time. Love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about finding someone worth growing with, someone who makes you braver than you thought you could be. What kind of love story are you brave enough to write? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.